Well, thank you so much for that warm introduction. And we could have really condensed it. It could have really been, hey, this is Daniel Gray-Kontar. He works for VNAT and he makes great stuff with great people. And it's so good to be in conversation with great people, both here in the physical space and also with each and every one of you in the digital domain. So I am so grateful for this invitation to be in conversation with you all. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get started. So the name of this talk is Imagination for an Imagined Nation. And this is really about my life's work and what I am hoping to bring here to the university. And my work really is about centering young artists to position as organic intellectuals, or said a different way, to invite young artists to become catalysts for liberatory democracy. So I'm going to try to do a bunch of things here. And the reason for that is that I found which one thing I wanted to do. So I put them all together, and I'm prayerful and hopeful that it makes sense to each and every one of you that is here and present. So we're going to get started. So this is the archaeology of my conversation with you today. I'm really going to start just by introducing myself to you and providing you hopefully with my positionality. My interest is not in tooting my own horn. My interest is just in making sure that we are all clear about how I came to the work. And in that context, I'll also share what over time have emerged as my core beliefs and commitments in all work that I do. Share a little bit about the role of the artist, in my view, in shaping a liberatory democracy. Connect that to a brief history of the Bruce D. Nesbitt African American Cultural Center, also known as BNAP. To share what have emerged for me as 3 levels of arts integration, and to really kind of become a thought partner, hopefully with each and every one of you, about what arts integration can look like via BNAC. And maybe that can happen through conversation if we have time. So that's a whole lot of stuff to try to do in just a relatively short period of time. So let me start with my positionality, how I came to this work. And that starts, so there's 3 people to my right, which may be your left, and the person in the middle is my big mama. That is Susie Ruth Ray. And Susie Ruth Ray was a very special person. Sitting next to her is my mother. And that person that doesn't look anything like me is actually me. And so I start with this because it's really important for me to articulate how I started in this work, which is really through my grandmother, who is from Camilla, Georgia. And her best friend one day sat on her bed with a map of the United States on it. And her friend J.R. Reed said, "You point, and wherever you point, that's where we're going to go." And so my grandmother did that, and her finger landed on Cincinnati, Ohio. And they both looked at each other and said, "No, we ain't going there." What is it about this great or the best location in the nation place, which was then Cleveland, Ohio? And they decided to go there. Now, part of the reason why they decided to go there is because some of you seated here know that there were what were called sister churches. And so my grandmother attended a sister church in Atlanta. And that sister church in Atlanta had a church in Cleveland called St. Timothy Missionary Baptist Church. So here's what that meant. You had a sponsor at your sister church. And so my grandmother and my mother moved to Cleveland, where they lived with their sponsor, who was a member of St. Timothy Missionary Baptist Church. This is why I tell you all of that. The person who is standing with his hand in the air is Reverend John T. Whedon. Reverend Whedon would preach and preach. And one day I noticed that people were doing something called getting happy in church. And so I looked at Reverend Whedon as he was preaching, and I saw that this man was reading words from a book that were making people happy. And at 4 years old, I pointed at him. And what that point meant was, I want to do that. I didn't know what that meant, but what I understand was that I wanted to read words from a book that made people happy. So now you can see my mother and my grandmother and me and Reverend Whedon, and then underneath Reverend Whedon, there's Langston Hughes. Chicago has Wynn Brooks. Cleveland has Langston Hughes, who everyone here probably knows was considered poet laureate of the Harlem Renaissance, but came of age in the city of Cleveland. And so I was exposed to Langston at a very, very early age. But the thing about Reverend Whedon that we have to remember, or that you have to know, is that Reverend Whedon was not just an incredible and powerful preacher, but Reverend Whedon was also an integral part of the civil rights movement in the city of Cleveland. And so there is a whole history and legacy between St. Timothy Missionary Baptist Church and the work of Langston Hughes. And in both spaces, in the personage of Langston Hughes and also in the Church of St. Timothy, I emerged as a very young poet reciting poems at St. Timothy by the age of 6. So this is how I began. We're going to fast forward to when I was in college. And so I became a member of what was called the Black Poetic Society, which was founded as an outgrowth of our African American Cultural Center at Cleveland State University. And so the Black Poetic Society had become one of the most important African American poetry ensembles in the greater Cleveland area, and Pittsburgh and Philly, all over that part of our country. To the degree that we were also leading protest marches on and off our campus, which you'll see pictured here to my right, maybe your left there, and also producing plays. And so the image at the bottom to my right, your left, is the first play that I directed, which was a collection of poems by a poet by the name of Etheridge Knight, a Black arts movement poet. And this collection of poems was called Black Voices from Prison. And so I cut my teeth at Cleveland State University out of its cultural center by co-founding a Black performance poetry ensemble called Black Poetic. And so this is sort of that history. So I grow a little older and I become a rapper by the name of Rep Life. I do still rhyme, I do still tour. And so these are some images of me as my alter ego, Rep Life. So emceeing, poetry, journalism, words have always been a part of my experience since I was 4 years old, and first pointed at Reverend Whedon and said, I want to do that. And that was my first exposure to the arts, right? So fast forward a little bit further, and I moved to the East Bay. I studied at the University of California at Berkeley. And at the same time that I studied there, I was immersed in the transformative education culture. And so the gentleman to your right is my dear brother, G. Reyes. And G, with his homies empowerment shirt on, emerged very much out of the traditions of the Black Panther Party and the Brown Panther Party and all the protest movements that emerged in the East Bay. And G was my first real educator about how to work with youth, around how to really center youth, around how to understand that youth are not just answers to tomorrow, but the answers to the present. And being super clear and intentional about making sure that youth voice is an essential part and a building block for the making of their own education, and in making sure that they sit at the table wherever any decisions are made about the neighborhoods in which they live. So it is incumbent upon me to make sure that I am clear about the importance of this brother, G. Reyes, whom I hope that you all will get a chance to know, learn, experience, even if it's just a quick Google search. But he is my dear brother and a very, very important pedagogue with respect to transformative arts education in the East Bay. Without him, I would not be sitting here with you. So that whole education in the East Bay was transformative for me as I moved back to Cleveland and became an arts educator. And so I was the executive director of an arts organization that I founded called 12 Literary Arts. And then I was also the chair of the Literary Arts Department at the Cleveland School of the Arts. And all of that work has led me to you. This is the work that has brought me here to this university. So hi. All right, so that is my positionality. And so out of all of this time, these are what have emerged as my core beliefs and commitments. I have unwavering belief in the power of youth voice. I have unwavering belief in the importance of making youth spaces, safe spaces. More safe spaces are what we need, not less. I have an unwavering commitment to transformative education for lifelong learners. And part of what that means is understanding that adults have as much to learn from youth as youth do from adults. I have unwavering belief and commitment to the merger of tradition and innovation. Don't believe in tradition just for the sake of tradition. Don't believe in innovating just to innovate, but it is the merger of the two that forms the foundation upon which I stand. And finally, love as a universal guiding force of all action. Everything springs out of love. So these are my core beliefs and commitments. I carry them with me everywhere I go, and I share them with you. So this is my positionality, and these are my core beliefs and commitments. I want to now do something that I don't ordinarily do. And I'm going to look at the time and make sure that I can do this. What I want to do next is I want to be in conversation about liberatory democracy. I want to tie that together with the role of the artist. But to do that, I want to play something for you. And I don't ordinarily play an entire something. For someone, it's usually a clip, but I want us to really sit in what we're about to experience together. And if you've never seen it, okay. But if you have, sit in it again for a second, third, or fourth time. I'm going to play for you Kendrick Lamar's Grammy performance from 2016. I'm prayerful that you will be able to hear it. We want to make sure. But I want us to sit in this entire experience, and then we will come back. So what I was going to try to do was connect the Kendrick Lamar video to this idea of liberatory democracy. And, so much of what Kendrick Lamar was able to articulate in that performance is truly an encapsulation of how he was using art as a method. And so part of what we want to talk about when we think about liberatory democracy, of course, is what it does is it helps us reimagine traditional democratic systems by centering the dismantling of oppression and fostering collective liberation, right? And so liberatory democracy provides an analysis of socially constructed archaeologies of power, of history, of language, of nation states, of the way in which we think about time, in the way in which we think about our systems of production, gender, race, and how all of these appear in our social structures. So it allows us to really rethink that, right? And also, unlike traditional liberal democracies, which prioritize procedural fairness or majority rule without really addressing systemic inequity, liberatory democracy seeks to empower marginalized communities and redistribute power to create conditions for all people to thrive.
And so if you would have seen what Kendrick Lamar did in his performance, you would have seen this almost perfectly matches, right? But we didn't, and that's okay. So let's now talk a little bit about the artist's role in shaping liberatory democracy. Now I want to really lean into the ways in which artists use beauty and provocation and imagination to disrupt oppression and nurture collective agency. I want to also talk about the way in which artists serve as mirrors and disruptors by amplifying the ideas and traditional norms and celebrating them, but also exposing its failures. And then lastly, I want to talk about how artists study dominant narratives. And those dominant narratives really undergird liberal democracy. But what artists do is they uplift counter narratives that give voice to different perspectives within our republic to make sure that all voices are heard. So this is important to articulate why. Why am I centering liberatory democracy in this conversation, in this sharing? And the reason for that is BNAC. And so part of what we really need to remember at all times about BNAC is that we have to remember February 14th, 1969, when a group of Black students demanded change. And they demanded also the establishment of a cultural center that would serve the needs of Black people. This is liberatory democracy in practice, in praxis. And so the program had two goals, which remain its goals to this moment. The goals were to encourage Black students to understand and to really remember their sense of pride and dignity based on their Blackness, and to create a safe space for students to develop themselves individually and collectively, and then to provide a space where we can learn about the contributions of Black citizens to the campus and to the larger national culture when those conversations we're simply not having. And when those conversations are being had, but not within today, but not always within the context of safe space, right? So BNAC in praxis was liberatory democracy at work. So I want to go back to the definition of liberatory democracy, and I just want us to look at it again and then think about BNAC. And I want us to really focus on what's underlined. The students centered the dismantling of oppression. The students fostered collective liberation. The students were looking for an analysis through their practice of socially constructed archaeologies of power. And the students empowered their community and others who were marginalized and forced us to think about the redistribution of power on this campus and to create for all people to thrive. And so that is why we have to have a conversation about liberatory democracy. And then I go back also to now what is the role of the artists in shaping liberatory democracy, and particularly as we think here about this campus, right? So artists have to be inspired, and they have to inspire us by using beauty and provocation and imagination to disrupt oppression and nurture collective agency. Artists here also serve as mirrors and disruptors, amplifying the ideas of liberal democracy and also exposing its failures. And then lastly, artists here, they support liberatory democracy by uplifting the counter narratives, understanding the dominant ones, celebrating them too, but knowing also that there are counter narratives that need to be shared so that all voices are heard. All right. All of this is to say, we have all said this that's on this screen. It is what it is. Artists don't say that. The reason they don't say that is because that means I don't have agency. It is what it is. That inherently articulates a lack of agency. The artist's role is to say it is not what it is, or it is as it is, but not it is what it is. Never that. Never that. You're ceding agency just by the use of your language. And so artists force us to think about the fact that it is not what it is. We're not going to let that happen. And it is the vision of the artist to create new worlds, new possibilities, new ways of thinking. Now, I also want to say, as we talk about liberatory democracy, a lot of my students, they get it mistaken. So they think that I'm sitting here looking at, Malcolm X, in this space. I'm here in the spot here in Cranard. And what we are not attempting to teach young people is propaganda. And part of what we have to remember is that if I'm a poet, it is also liberatory to look at a flower and how it grows and write about that. Because in this time, there is nothing more liberatory than writing about a flower and how it grows and relating that to the growth of the people. Nothing like it. It's beautiful, right? So we have to be clear about what we write, how we act, all these things with respect to liberatory democracy. All right, I won't preach about that. All right, so in this talk so far, I have shared my positionality. I have shared my core beliefs and commitments. I have shared my ideation or my idea around liberatory democracy. I have shared the brief history of BNAC, which brings me to what I believe are the three levels of arts integration. And then we can begin to have a conversation, if we like, about that. And part of my role vis-a-vis BNAC is to really help me understand in this new role, which is very new for me and all of us, the ways in which these three levels of arts integration can happen through BNAC. So we'll start. So the first level, the three levels of arts integration for me are exposure, engagement, and excellence. Exposure is one's first touch. It is the thing that made this young Black boy from Cleveland reach out and point and say, I want to do that. Engagement is the process of allowing folk to practice for the first time. It may be their first, it may be their second touch. It is beyond their exposure to the arts and to the art form, but it is the actual engagement. It is the initial practice. And then the excellence is the next step beyond that. That is the mastery. That is the person who has been exposed to the arts, has been initially engaged, and that ultimately decides, I think I'm an artist. So these are three levels. And I want to just really articulate what these might look like. And this is not a comprehensive explanation or exploration into what each of these are, but these are just some things to be mindful of. To begin, arts exposure is for students of all skill levels. It works best when there are strong, intentional, institutional partnerships in place. These can be one-offs, but they have to be strong. It provides arts exposure opportunities for students to discuss meaning and impact. So we don't just watch Kendrick Lamar, but we provide opportunities vis-a-vis exposure for folks to make meaning together and to discuss impact, to have conversations about the distinction between dominant narrative and counter narrative and why counter narrative is important. So having these kinds of conversations is an important part of exposing the arts. And this is what makes the arts so meaningful in our democratic process. It provides opportunities for students to engage with more arts engagement. So you've been exposed to this, Shaquan. Now that you've been exposed to this, Shaquan, Do you want to go practice over here with Miss Louise, who is teaching piano? Right. So it provides those opportunities for folks who are exposed to think about more engagement and to actually do it. It includes meaningful pre and post experiential learning and meaning making. So the setup to the exposure is as important as the exposure. And the debrief after the exposure is as important as the pre-exposure, as the pre-engagement and the actual exposure to the thing. And last, arts exposure works really well when it's co-facilitated by students who display arts excellence. And we'll come back to that later, right? So it's awesome for students who are peers or a little bit older or have mastery to be present and a part of the arts exposure process. All right, so this is exposure. This is just the first touch. Let's go now to arts engagement. So arts engagement doesn't necessarily mean that it usually means that you can opt in, right? It's not like forced upon you. You can opt in. It provides opportunities for students to practice an art form at the novice and the intermediate levels. Students are exposed to an arts master with support from a student who displays arts mastery. I want to repeat that. Students are exposed to a master with support from a student who displays arts excellence. Arts engagement works best as consistent, routinized learning opportunities as opposed to one-offs, right? So routine in the arts engagement experience is necessary. It's important. Arts engagement also provides introductory history, technique, form, but it also allows for malleability and innovation, understanding that young people are organic intellectuals, right? So they're bringing with them a natural genius. Even though they may not be practitioners, they're bringing with them stuff, residue from the culture that can inform their practice. And that information can inform the master teacher on how to better teach them. And it provides culminating events for students to display new works before an audience. So this may be the first time that that Juanita is performing in front of her mama. This might be the first time for that, right? And that may be the catalyst for her to ultimately want to become a master, right? So this is arts engagement. These are just the levels or the layers that I think about and that I'm trying to understand how those exist here and how they work. And finally, there is arts excellence. So arts excellence, these are students who are endeavoring to become masters. And they're outlined here. I can't see my screen, so I'm gonna turn a little bit. So it is for students who identify as practicing artists. They identify as that. They have said, I'm an artist. I think I'm an artist. So this is for them. Students plan and co-facilitate arts experiences for other students. So this is the leadership component that comes from an artist, that from a student that decides they want to be an artist and that they are. Students support the work of arts masters. We articulated that earlier. There's development and execution of program opportunities that are uniquely designed for arts leaders. There's all this stuff here. But the one that I love and that my students love that I have worked with is that they get paid for their work as artists and facilitators. This is important. And students are provided with pathways to practice their art forms professionally. So these are all a part of arts excellence in my experience. All right. The last thing I would love to do is share with you some of my students, in Cleveland, at least. And this is what they did. They knew that Valentine's Day was coming. This is, as you can see, Valentine's Day of 2022. They knew also that they came from homes where they were endeavoring to better understand what self-love means and what collective love means. And so what they decided to do was to host a gathering at 12 House, which existed then. And they wanted to invite mothers. And they wanted to invite mothers to partake in gift baskets that they themselves had made. And they gave them to all the mothers that visited the house. They cooked food for them. And then they took about 2.5 weeks to create a digital performance that was all recorded at our house that the parents, that the mothers could watch on this Valentine's Day to remind them that they are loved, to remind them of what love is, and to do that through performance. What I will do is, because you can only hear the audio, I'm going to play the poem that opens the entire video. And I think it's beautiful. It's by a young poet and dancer named Keith Benford Jr. This is his introductory poem.
Equidistant to the space.
My apologies. Okay, here we go.
Awesome. Love is friendship, persistence, hate resistant. It's equidistant to the space between us and God. So the words I love you is the language of angels.
Oh, I think I'm okay.
We abandon it for sport.
I think it's this one.
We call his name and close the door when it comes. Stranded, love looks for a home. We've tried to make it turn it into a trend, but when real meets love, there's no end to its reign. SWV, rain down that living water for 6 months, 2 times a year, please. For me, rain down into 2 cups of tea. For you, 1, for me, 1. Holy water may feel good, but it doesn't always taste that way. So let us put some honey in our cups when we're not being good friends to each other. Or maybe some chamomile to ease the weight of each other's burdens. Or maybe some peppermint for when we lose touch, what makes us tick. Maybe even some ginger when honesty is the next step in this. Honestly, love has so many flavors and nuances that it doesn't need any sugarcoating. It lives in the raw resource of God. So every time I say I love you, please refer to 1 Corinthians 13 so that you know I mean what I say. So that you know what I mean in every taste, in every personification. Let love reverberate until it's in our innate nature. To love you every day is a gift. To love yourself is a gift. To love every moment, whatever it may be, is a gift. That's why we call it the present. Love, so misunderstood. Love, so misbranded. Love, so undecided to the point where I can't stand it. Love is the divine. Love is God. Love is a muscle. Love is 1 Corinthians 13. To love yourself is to love someone else. The essence of love is both. Love is a lifestyle. Love is his poem Deconstructed. Love is reconstruction. Love is a priority. I know I went off on a tangent, but I hope that answered your question.
So that was this 19-year-old young man's articulation of what love is. It was his reminder in a moment that could have felt painful for some people to remember what it is and how to love themselves. And this was their way of merging art with a really important moment in our communities. They took their time out to remember and center the importance of love as we think about remaking neighborhoods and communities. So I'm going to end there. What I have endeavored to do in this talk, I probably tried to do way too many things. But I'm prayerful that something that I may have said has been meaningful to you. Please understand that nothing that I have said is a prescription. These are simply the beginnings and the introduction of a conversation about the way in which the arts can become a part of our students' everyday lived experiences on this campus, based on my experiences in Cleveland. And so I am so very happy and grateful to be in your company, to be in conversations with you, to be in beloved community with you. And I will be quiet because I've said a lot of words, and I'm going to stop. And if anyone has any questions or thoughts or anything that they want to share, um, I'm here for it. Thank you very kindly.
When you said something about youth sitting at the table where decisions are made. And I think that's so important because, sometimes as an older adult, you think, it's kids, but they have such great ideas. And if we could just listen to them and give them agency over those ideas, I think we would all learn. It's just, it's just having them at the table. I think that's a great idea.
Having
And
them having them at the table is the reason that BNAC and other cultural centers and other departments exist.
and we appreciate all that has come out of BNAC and all of the other departments as well. I think it makes this campus all the better for having everyone here and hopefully moving towards having everyone have an equal voice in the situation. I'm also going to say to anyone, if you don't feel like asking a question out loud, feel free to put it into the chat and I will read it. But otherwise, let's open it up for anyone else who'd like to talk.
So I'll have a quick question if nobody else is asking. So Danny, you shared in your brief bio your startings in the Baptist church and your focus on your value of being rooted in love, and then this last little poem you read. Sounds like there's a heavy influence in the Bible and Christianity. Just curious, is that the case? And what role does that play, in the things that you're doing on campus?
That is a really wonderful question. And I thank you so much for that. So, that upbringing will always be a part of who and what I am. Always. It will always be there. And I think that at the end of the day, what we really must remember is the core of Christianity and what all religions espouse and aspire to become, which is a centeredness and rootedness in love as the essence and core of all things. All things are made of love. And so that is a part of me and has been a part of me ever since Grandmama Susie Ruth Ray first introduced me to the walls of St. Timothy Baptist Missionary Baptist Church. So I'm so grateful that you received that you see that message of love is core to who and what I seek to be. So thank you. Thank you for that.
Hey Daniel, wait, is it echo? Okay. So it's Demaya. So just introduce myself. My name is Demaya Simon. I'm a senior here at U of I, majoring in communications, and I'm an intern at the Bruce D. Nesbitt African American Culture Center as the historian and archive intern. So I wanted to ask, considering the foundational elements you expressed about the BNAC Center and the democracy that goes into that, how would you tell students to express that concern to others to build that community back on campus as it used to be more integrated back early on when it was just the Black House? I don't know if I explained it right, but that's a deep question.
Well, I'm here for it, Demaya, and I don't know you to do anything other than ask me deep questions. So I'm very much used to it. And I thank you again for this one. And so, you know, part of what I think is really important is for us to remember how important it is for us to hold each other close and for us to really center that, for us to center bringing one another together and bringing one another closer. So much of the way in which we interface with this world um, inspires us to separate ourselves, especially in this moment. And so the act of bringing each other together and the act of karamu, the act of joyful gathering, and just sitting with each other and holding each other close. And out of that act and out of that process, we will begin to organize and we will begin to find commonality. And we will begin to remember that coming together, that creation of a beloved community, that understanding of self and that nurturing of self that then allows us to connect with others, that love of self that allows us to love others and to practice that in concert. Um, I think that is in large part the way, and that is also the reason that BNAC exists for precisely that purpose. And so it's just us walking in purpose and being mindful of walking in purpose. Does that answer your question, my assignment?
Yes, that answers my question. I like the fact that you mentioned just us walking with one another and giving love, because that extends further out, not just within BNAC or the cultural centers, but within different departments and how we connect to one another within different cultural aspects. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
All right, I have one other, I don't know if it's a question or a statement for you, Daniel. One of the things you were talking about was the meaning making after an artist has, in this case, I think was like poetry, the meaning making. Does that mean someone should be explaining what their art means to someone, or are you supposed to take what you need from their art? I guess that's my question.
Oh, that is such a wonderful question. Oh my goodness, thank you for that. No, I think that what that means is what did we experience? What did I experience? And being in conversation about what I experienced and hearing what you experienced, and setting also um, the practice of ways that community can interface with each other, right? Setting that practice. What makes a safe space? And how can we share what we have experienced together within a space that is safe so that all voices are heard, right? So that is really very, very intentional. It's not about, you know, anyone in the space saying this is what this means. That's not necessary. It really is about the experience. What did you experience, right? Now, um, yeah, I'll leave it there. I'll leave it there because the meaning making comes out of the understanding that we are all bringing expertise to the experience, and that expertise lives inside of you. It lives inside of your truth, and so you bring your truth to the space as you engage with the thing. And so, hearing our truths in a respectful, safe way, helping each other make meaning of the thing. I found that in community, we have made meaning of some of the densest works of art, some of the densest texts, but in community, we have made meaning together. And that is a beautiful thing. And that is what art is inspired to do. And that is why art is such an important part of the democratic process, which is all about dialogue, conversation, voice, and identifying meaning together. And we could use a lot more of that in this moment. Such a wonderful question. Thank you for that.
All right. Does anyone else have anything that they would like to ask Daniel? I know we could go on and on talking about this. Like try to keep respectful of your time. So I'm going to open it up for one last question. And if no one has anything, we will wrap things up.
I have one if nobody else does, but I don't want to go if somebody else has something they want to say.
Go ahead, Rebecca. We got time.
Okay, so thank you, Daniel, first for this. This was lovely and very thought-provoking. You talked about this moment that we're at now.
Mm.
If you had advice for us who have listened to this, and how we can, come together as communities, are there things that we could be looking for, maybe stepping out of our comfort zones? What would your, if we take away one thing, what would you hope that would be?
That is such a great question, and I laugh because
I just put the weight of the whole world on your shoulders. Apologies for that, but
you know, listen more. Listen more. That's it. Listen more. Listen to each other more. Listen more. Listen to understand. We fail at that, and I am saddened to say that it is my witness. Thank you so much for being here. It is my generation. I'm a Generation Xer, and titled that because they didn't know what we were going to be. We were the unknown generation. And sadly, my generation, we do not listen. We're not good at it. And my generation has ushered in this moment in a lot of really interesting and sad ways. So we do not listen. We're not good at it. And so I speak to my generation as a person who is of it and from it and shaped out of it, that we need to do better at listening, to understand. And that includes all people, understanding the natural genius that exists in each person. Not understanding that is the reason that we are here. So there's that.
I think that's an excellent point to end on. Listen more. I know it's hard. I know I try, but at this point in time, it's sometimes it's difficult. And I thank you for sharing this truth with us, because I think this is something that needs to be said over and over and over again.
Thank you so much. All is well. And everybody who is here in the digital domain and also here in present with me in this space, find joy today.